lights, obviously, all Australians know about the Min Min lights, or at least in this room. But I think most people do. They know about the Min Min lights, and they know about the Frederick Valencic case if they're going to know anything about anything related to the UFO phenomenon. So the Min Min lights are certainly mysterious. They've been happening for a long time. People don't know what they are. Lots of people have gone to investigate them. Some scientists think they have the answers. I don't agree with what they say, and I'll tell you why by the end of the presentation. But Min Min lights are certainly very mysterious, and they sometimes frighten people, they sometimes frighten animals, other times they don't. They sometimes pace vehicles or pace horse riders. Sometimes they come up to them, and when someone goes close to them, they move away. They're very strange indeed, but they certainly seem to have some sort of intelligence. And I like this is up in the Booyah Shire. And they've got this up there for tourism. I see they've got erected by the Booyah Shire Council in the interest of tourism. Because like a lot of outback towns, each little town has its own tourist thing to help bring people there, because there's not a lot of reason to go out of Western Queensland. Because as Barry likes to say, there's a whole lot of nothing between nowhere and, and somewhere. So the Booyah Shire is the area where most of the reports come from in Queensland. And I think I've got a map here. This is a map out of a book that I'm going to talk about soon. Actually, it's this one, The Mystery of the Min Min Light by Maureen Kozica. It's the only book that I'm aware of written by an Australian, and the book is just about the Min Min lights. But the area that she went through, in 1992, she received a grant from the Arts Division, and she went for a month through Queensland looking for reports of the Min Min. And she found that most of them, obviously, were in these areas here, and it's between Booyah. There's a little settlement up here, which I don't know if it's even marked there, called Min Min, Warrelda, and Middleton. They're just this area here, but also around here, a few up here, a few out here, because Brisbane, it's not too far out. Dalby's just there if you can't see it. So, Warrenda, not Warrelda, sorry. And she documented 140 cases of Min Min reports. And I think she's probably the only person so far that's done that in Australia. And she spoke to lots of people about these mysterious lights. The area around where these reports come from, as you can see and as we know, is very, desolate, not a lot going on, fairly flat, occasional hills. This is 30 minutes out of Booyah. You can see why no one wants to go there. And these little towns have to lure people out there for some reason, like the Birdsville races and things like that. Not a lot going on out there, not a lot to see. Coming into Booyah, again, you can see why you really don't want to go there. And that's not to say really anything bad about the town, it's just there's not a lot to see. So, but it's certainly a friendly town, as the sign suggests. And again in the township as well. So small population, and the thing with the Min Min lights is that people do report seeing them, but if you're going to seek them in such a large state like Queensland, in fact Australia as a country, it's very difficult to track them down. So all you can do is to see them for yourself. So all you can do is actually go and speak to the people who've seen them, much like the UFO phenomenon. So the history supposedly is that the first documented report was at the back of the Min Min Hotel, where there was a graveyard, and a stockman was riding in. He saw one of the lights over one of the graves there, and scared the bejesus out of him, and he took off to the nearest town, which was 4 miles away. So I'm not sure what that is in kilometres, but 4 miles at the time. And I was really surprised. I was digging through the Trove website. For those of you who want to do your own research about any UFO subject, you can go onto the, I think it's the National Library. It's putting as many of the old newspaper reports online as it can. So the place to go is Trove, trove.org, and you can look up things there. So I was really surprised to find this, you know, in a Brisbane newspaper, to see the story, a very short story about the Min Min Hotel being destroyed by fire, considering it's so far away. But there you go. Small population in Brisbane at the time. This was 1924. In Queensland, I meant to say. So I guess that might have been why that was listed there. I'm not really sure. But that was the accepted first report. But actually, there was a report, and this is in a book published in 1838, which 6 months in South Australia by Thomas Horton James. And in there he lists a report of a strange light, which could be regarded as a Min Min light too. So I'm sure that a lot of the Indigenous people in Australia who live in the outback are aware of these things. From the reports that I've read, they are. And interestingly, you know, as I said, some people have experiences that frighten them, and they're European people, but some of those people are not frightened, they're just extremely curious. So they'll go off and driving after the reports or riding on their horses. Some of the jackaroos do, and they go off and look for them, and as they approach them, they pull back from them, and as they turn around and come back, whoops, they, the Min Min comes towards them. So it's a responsive phenomenon which seems to show some intelligence, because it does other things as well, which we'll get on to. Some people have fired at the Min Min lights with, obviously nothing happens. They almost appear to be like the, you know, the Foo Fighters, those lights that go through the aeroplanes that they reported in World War II. They'd come up and they'd go through solid matter. They seem to do that as well. And there was one, I only have 30 minutes tonight, but I do have two clips I'd like to show you, but there was one clip that I'm not showing, was a man who was doing outback tours, and he'd done them for 20 years. And a Min Min came up towards him on the road, and he thought it was actually a truck, and he pulled off the side of the road, and the light just went smack bang into and through his van while he had passengers in it. So he didn't know what that was. They've often seen at distances, and some say that's why they're some sort of optical effect, because you need to have a distance for that effect to occur. Some of them are quite close. Some of them will emit a glow, but it only glows on the environment for up to about 8 to 10 feet from where it is. So that doesn't explain the glows that can be seen like kilometres away in the distance. So that's the book, Maureen Kozika. So there is a tale that if you follow the Min Min, I think this is just Australian folklore, but if you follow the Min Min, you'll come to some sort of terrible end. Some people actually have, but only because they've been silly enough to go off the edge of a cliff. They haven't actually watched where they were going, because they want to catch the Min Min. So they get on the horse and they're going along, or in the car, and then phew! So that's how that actually happens. And I think that's probably how that folklore started. Like I said, some animals respond to them and some don't. There are reports of Min Min skimming over the back of some of the cattle in stockyards, and the cattle paying them no attention whatsoever. At other times, the lights can be so bright that they can come upon a horse, and the horse will flinch and want to take off, and the rider's got to hold them back. And that may be because, you know, there are some animals that are more sensitive to things, to external stimuli than other animals, just like humans. Some humans are more sensitive than other humans. So that may be why it happens to some animals and not to others. Okay, before I go on to that, I just want to read a couple of reports that are out of this book because I find them really interesting. So this is one report, a bit of light, it's tiny writing too. This was where the horse wasn't perturbed and the rider said, I'd cross the river, let's have a bit more light because I can't see in this dim light. Thank you. I crossed the river, was out on the high downs riding along with about 2 o'clock in the morning. Station managers used to do those sorts of things in those days, cold. The wind whistled again. I was going along in good style, singing to keep the body warm, and Nellie, I'm guessing the horse, didn't seem to mind the row. Anyway, cars weren't common in those days, and this is another point to remember, that apparently there was a flap of Min reports during the 50s, and there weren't too many vehicles in Queensland Outback in the 1950s. Because a lot of people say, oh, it's vehicle headlights, coming. But there were so many reports, it was difficult to put it down to just those. Cars weren't common. There were only 2 or 3 in the district. Even so, that light didn't resemble a car light. It was too green. Now, there's another thing, that some of the lights will actually be different colours. Green, blue, and red are fairly common, but as individual lights. I've lost it. Here we go. It floated rather than travelled. It was too high above the ground to come from a car, and it cast a glow all around it instead of cutting a line straight ahead. I had a look at the mare. She wasn't a bit perturbed. She didn't even lift her head or prick her ears to have a look at that thing coming towards us. So that was one report. Now here's another one. I just wanted to read this one because I thought this was curious. In the middle of this book, someone talks about ground circles. So I thought I'd just share this with you. On several occasions in lightly forested country near Helensvale, south of Cooktown, you go down there and you'd see these big circles in the ground. The grass was sort of dead in that area, flattened out. Last year and the year before it happened twice. So I thought I'd just share that with you. And we do get reports of people up in the northern Queensland talking about circles quite a bit. The other thing is, the strange thing is, Min lights can actually repeat a behaviour over and over and over again. And this person says it was always the same pattern. Night after night, the Min light would come from behind the shearers' quarters, around and into the bore drain. South of Hewenden, there was a Min light that used to appear with monotonous regularity in the 1920s. So we need to be an octopus and have another arm. Here we go. Now this is a report from an Aboriginal person. The light appeared maybe 20 or 30 yards away. It moved around our camp slowly 3 or 4 times. Everyone saw it. We had plenty of time to look at it. This is from someone. The Aborigines who usually sleep out on the ground around the fire wouldn't that night. They all came inside the tents. And I have found that from reports that Maureen collected, that a lot of the Indigenous people, they just don't want to know about it. And I'm guessing that these are, traditional people who are living right out in the outback. And someone else says, whoops. The horizon is there all around, filled with dips, rises, floodways and jump-ups. Lights 10 kilometres away appear quite close. Often we'd see a pinpoint of blue-green light and would expect it to materialise into a vehicle, only to see it disappear. A few seconds or minutes later it would reappear, perhaps higher this time. Off it would go again and so on. Sometimes it emerged out of the night as a reassuring car or truck rushing past. At other times the black night kept its own counsel. And one more. The other interesting thing is they go against the breeze too, so it can't be put down to something floating in the air. This person says it looked like a balloon, but it was floating against the breeze. It travelled fast beside me into a westerly wind and it stayed put for 4 miles. I've seen it going against a strong southerly wind too. So all very interesting in those. Now some of the explanations that people would like us to accept, and that's okay, I'm sure some of these explanations do fit the bill. Optical illusions, Jack Pettigrew from the UQ suggests that it's to do with the, lights that are being seen that can be hundreds of miles away, to do with the curvature of the Earth, and depending on the conditions at the time, that can happen in regard to the Fata Morgana type of mirage, I guess you call it, or an optical effect, where that can be a few hundred miles away, but because of the conditions at the time, that you can actually see it above the horizon, which is very strange. The other thing is that it could be swamp gas, and I did have a clip, but because of time I just couldn't play it, but you can see how something like that in the dead of night, in the dark, with because it has a fluorescence about it that could light up the dark. Iridescent feathers on birds, some of it could be to do with what they pick up, but there are birds that have iridescent feathers as well, and this is a bird of paradise. And so it's pulled its head back and put its feathers up, and on this one you can see what it actually looks like from the front, which is very bizarre. But and I was really curious to read that the blackness of the feathers of that particular bird, which is found in New Guinea and in Queensland, but generally on the coast, not in the outback, is that it has a very, very similar ability to absorb 99.6% of light, like black holes do. Isn't that curious? I thought it was an interesting side bit. So, but that is so that iridescent feathers will glow in the environment and attract a mate. So again, you could see if that was happening in the evening. I don't know if they do it at night, but if it was happening in the evening, that could actually be a bit of a soft glow that some people describe for midnights. Others describe them as quite bright, but none of them describe them as actually having being of a beam. There's no beam of light involved. So midnights are silent, they're intelligent and responsive. Sometimes animals respond to them and other times they don't. They cast a glow, and they can be so bright that they can cast shadows on surrounding areas. And there is one report in here where someone said that the light came up to the rider and the horse and was so close that you could see the shadow of them on the ground. So the light was bright enough to do that, to be able to cast a shadow. They can move through physical objects. They can travel at high speeds up to 130 kilometres an hour. They can keep pace at high speeds for up to 2 hours or more. One report said it was for 4 hours. That's not a bird. And they can travel against the breeze or stiff winds. So I've got 2 clips here that I want to play for you. So I'll just play this one first. Do you want to turn the light down now? You can.
Col Rebo has spent most of his 72 years travelling and working in the bush, and as you can imagine, he'd seen and heard some remarkable things. But when he spoke to local legends, he told us his version of events with his encounter with the infamous Paddy's Lantern.
Around here in 1975, I put the window in the house actually and looked across the paddock towards the mountain. Was a bright, soft, glowing light, ball of light, probably 2 or 3 feet in diameter. First saw it, we thought it was in the shed and thought it was a tractor I was working on, it caught fire. I drove across there, got there dead quiet, there was no light whatsoever, had switched off. Had a poke around, couldn't find nothing wrong. We came back to the wife, who was almost having hysterics about the light turned off before you got there. Up in the shed there, she thought it was on fire, the tractor in that shed there. when the light came on a second time, quite brightly, I was still intrigued. I decided to walk on it. So I walked straight across the paddock to it, in amongst some old cars, incandescent, beautiful soft white light, opened the front door of an old car facing the light source, and the light coming in through the window somehow lit up the floor mats under the dash. This was utterly like inside a neon tube with incandescent. I couldn't believe how light could bend around everywhere. The focus of the light was up in a patch of the thorniest, closer together grown scrub you couldn't walk into. You imagine trying to walk through that in the middle of the night if all of a sudden it got black dark. And I poked around for a while in amongst just walking around, noticed the way I treated the chrome on the old cars, and I could actually throw a shadow with my hand from it. It was about good enough, the light was about good enough to read a newspaper. I couldn't see the nucleus, so it must have been off the ground. There was no way it was moonlight, there was no way it was anything but something peculiar. The very next day I went around to see the neighbour, and biggest conversation was the lights in the bush. He took me outside and showed me where he lined up somebody he thought with a pressure lamp trying to climb down over a sheer cliff in the middle of the night before, and he was yelling out to him to go back. The next morning he actually physically climbed the cliff to see if he'd find tracks or find someone had fallen off the cliff. So it's the only set of lights I can't explain. I'm a bit sorry I didn't go into the middle and push a bit harder. I've been looking for them for the last 30 years, they haven't come back yet.
So, bright enough for the light to shine in through the windscreen and onto the mat on the floor of the car. I don't know how to explain that. I'm open to ideas. And I've got another clip here too. This one. This is two ladies who live in Outback Queensland.
Hello, I'm Kalinda Clough. My husband and I live on a property 40k north of Boulia. We've lived on that property for 20 years. I lived in the Boulia Shire all my life. My parents used to own Linda Downs and Roxburgh on the Georgina River, and it was in the late 70s that I had my first sighting of the Min Min light. I was about 15 at the time, and my friend and I and my sister, who's 4 years older than me, and her friend, Heather, we went camping on a property 15k up from Linda Downs called Jimbarella, a very good fishing hole, and we planned to stay the night there and fish all night. Somewhere during the night, fairly early in the night, I think about between 8 and 9, someone noticed that there must have been a roo shooter shooting on Jimbarella, because we saw a white light kind of above the gidgee trees behind us, and we took not much notice of it, just thinking that it was a roo shooter. A little while later, the light seemed to be getting quite close to us, and we said, gee, that roo shooter's getting a bit close. Someone seemed to mention, and I've just forgotten who, that they couldn't hear anything, like the sound of a vehicle, and the light, which was a white glowing light, which was kind of hovering above the trees, was getting closer, and we all agreed at the same time there should be some kind of noise. And we thought, gee, that roo shooter's getting a little bit close for comfort. And then finally someone said, maybe it's the Min Min light. And we all thought, well, it could be, being very silent. We got an awry feeling went through us when we thought it could be the Min Min light. So we sat there for a little bit longer, but not too much longer. We in the end, 4 of us squeezed in the front of a Toyota, and we headed back the 15k to Linda Downs, where I lived. We woke up with Mum and Dad and told them we'd just had a sighting of the Min Min light. And they said they'd check it out the next day, and we had to go back to roll our swags. So the next day my father came with us on his motorbike, and he looked around in the vicinity of where we thought the light was, but it's really hard to estimate at night how far away it might have been. We feel it might have been about somewhere 5k away, it might have been 2k away, it might have only been half a k before we left. It seemed to hover behind us, it didn't follow us, but it was just an awry feeling that passed through us, and he couldn't find any tracks, so he put it down to that it wasn't a roo shooter. We rolled our swags, and we said that we must have had our first sighting of the Min Min light. And since then I've had one other sighting in the Boulia Shire. My husband, who is originally from the Winton Shire, he's had a few sightings around Middleton, but the only thing that we both can conclude, when we've had sightings, it's been in good seasons out here in the west, but I don't really know what the Min Min light is, and I didn't wait around long enough to find out.
I'm Maureen Lincoln. I live in Boulia, as far out as you can get from the cities. Just talking about the Min Min light. One of the stories I'll tell you, my encounters with it. Grew up with it as a child, living in the bush all my life. I was working in Baduri at the time, which is about 114 miles, that's not kilometres either, that's miles, from Boulia. And the main road to Baduri, we'd had rain and the Georgina River was up and you couldn't cross, so I had to come a long way around to get back to Boulia. I was coming home for the weekend. Anyway, it was dark when I got to Mudjacka, which is about 27 miles from Boulia. And there's some sand hills there, and there's a clump of what they call the waddy trees. And I pulled up there to go to the toilet, actually. It was pitch dark by then. And switched the car off and got out and walked around, and all of a sudden a light appeared, the Min Min light, through the waddy trees. And I knew it couldn't be a kangaroo shoot or anything like that, because you're flat out riding a horse through the trees. They're so thick you can't drive a car through there. Anyway, I walked over towards it, and of course it moved away, which the Min Min light will, and walked back to the car, and it followed me back. I stood around the car for quite a while, and it was just probably about 3 feet off the ground. And I spent, I suppose, a good 3/4 of an hour there just watching it. And it's not a big glowy light, it was like a red hot coal, you know. It's probably not quite as big as the moon, big as a soccer ball probably. It's an amazing thing. And ended up getting in the car and driving the rest of the way into town. I think it's something from some outer space somewhere. I've lived in the bush all my life and I'm not superstitious. But it's a very intelligent thing. It can follow you for hundreds of miles. And whether you're doing 20 mile an hour in a car or 80, it can keep up with you. I've heard a lot of theories of being a bird with phosphorus on it. Gases can't travel at that speed and follow you for that distance, and can switch from one side of the road to the other. Can go higher, or it can come down to ground level. It's mostly see it after we've had rain. On a very still night, you'll never ever have ever seen one on a windy, cloudy night, usually a fairly clear night. No moon, pretty dark, no wind, on a very still night. And I think it's just something from somewhere else. Doesn't belong to us anyway, that's for sure.
So there's two people's experiences. Interestingly, that the second lady, I think she said, you can often see them when it's been wet, and the first lady said it's always when it's in a good season. Now I don't know whether she didn't qualify whether that means it's wet or just good. You know, I really don't know. But for anyone who would like to check it out at some stage, it's a long way from Brisbane, but there is a centre called the Min Min Encounter out in Boulia. You can go there, and they've got an animated display for people to have a look at, and lots of reports. Some years ago I did contact the Boulia Shire, because I then got an interest in the Min Min lights, and probably about 15, 20 years ago, and they sent me down a whole lot of reports that they'd had typed up, and they give out to people of interest, you know, I guess media and school children, all sorts of people. And they were very interesting, a lot of them by people in tourist buses, but at the moment I just cannot find that folder. But anyway, so that's it for the Min Min lights. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed something about the Min Min, and maybe at a later stage I'll go into a little bit more depth.